Welcome to the nodding hour. Find a comfortable position, let your eyes grow heavy, and allow these quiet stories to carry you gently off to sleep. The door of the bookshop is painted dark green, its paint slightly worn at the edges where hands have pushed and pulled it over many years, the wood beneath showing through in small patches that have been there long enough to look intentional rather than neglected. A small bell above the door, not an electronic chime, but an actual bell, a small brass one on a curved spring, makes a brief and entirely genuine sound as the door opens, a sound that belongs to this kind of shop, and no other kind that announces an arrival without making any particular fuss about it, and then is silent. Inside. The door closes behind you, and the rain is immediately outside rather than on you, which is a significant improvement. The rain has been falling since mid-morning, and has been falling on you specifically for the past 10 minutes of walking from wherever you came from, and the inside of the bookshop receives you with a warmth and a dryness that is very specifically welcome after that. The shop is small and narrow, its floor space divided by shelves that run from near the front window to near the back wall, the shelves themselves old and slightly uneven, their wood dark with age, their uprights not quite vertical in places, the whole arrangement having the slightly organic quality of something that has been added to and adjusted over many years without any overall plan, beyond the immediate need to fit more books, which it does. Every shelf is full, not overstuffed, not books jammed in horizontally on top of vertical rows, but full in the considered way of a shop whose owner knows what they have and where it is, and has arranged it to be findable rather than merely present. The smell. This is the first thing, or the thing that becomes the first thing once you are through the door, and the bell has done its work, and the rain is outside, old paper, and slightly dry air, and something that might be the wood of the shelves, or might be something older than the shelves, something that has been accumulating in this particular space for however long this space has been a bookshop, which is visibly a long time. The smell of a secondhand bookshop is not the smell of a library. It is drier and more various, the product of many different books from many different places and times gathered together in a space that is warmer than most libraries and less ventilated. The smell of all those different papers and all those different inks and all those different years concentrated into something that is immediately and entirely recognizable as this kind of place and no other. The front of the shop has a window that faces the street. The window is slightly steamed at the bottom from the difference in temperature between inside and outside. The glass there opaque in a narrow band, and above that band the street is visible, wet and gray. The rain visible as a general movement in the air rather than as individual drops. The occasional person passing with an umbrella or a hood up, none of them looking in. The window has a display in it, a small arrangement of books on a low shelf inside the glass, their covers facing outward, chosen presumably for their visual appeal or their relevance to some occasion or season, arranged with care by someone who thought about it. A handwritten card among them says something that is not readable from here. A cat, on a chair behind the counter to the left of the door. A large orange cat in the deep and total sleep of a cat that has been sleeping in the same warm spot for several hours and has no immediate plans to change this. Its fur is slightly flattened on the side it is lying on, its tail curved around its feet, its eyes entirely closed, its breathing so slow and so shallow that it requires attention to detect. It does not acknowledge the bell or the door or your arrival in any way whatsoever, which is exactly right, which is the correct response of a bookshop cat to the arrival of a customer. The person behind the counter is not immediately visible. A door at the back of the counter area is slightly ajar. A light on behind it. The sound of something very faint from back there, paper perhaps, or the very quiet sound of someone doing something quiet. Then a head appears briefly in the gap of the door. A person of indeterminate middle age with reading glasses pushed up on their forehead, who looks at you with the unhurried assessment of a bookshop owner who has seen many people come through that door and can tell in a glance roughly what kind of browser you are going to be, which in your case seems to satisfy whatever criteria they apply, because they nod once and disappear back behind the door without saying anything, which is the ideal greeting, which asks nothing and offers everything. The first shelf to the left of the door. Fiction, alphabetical by author, running from A at the front to somewhere in the G's, before the shelf ends and another begins at right angles to it. The spines face outward as they should, some of them legible and some of them not, the less legible ones having given their color to the years while retaining their text, in a form that requires tilting the head and some goodwill to read. Pulling one out without particular intention, a novel, its cover, an illustration in the style of several decades ago, slightly foxed at the edges, its pages when fanned releasing a brief and concentrated version of the shop's general smell, the particular smell of this book's particular paper, and this book's particular years on this particular shelf, opening to a random page somewhere in the middle and reading a paragraph, then closing it and putting it back. The second shelf. Still fiction, but further along the alphabet. The M's and N's. The spines here slightly more varied in their condition, some very well preserved and some very much not. One or two with their spines entirely gone and their covers held on by nothing except the binding and some goodwill. A name catches the eye, an author known but not read for a long time, a book not encountered before. Taking it out and looking at the cover and reading the back and opening to the first page and reading the first paragraph, which is good, which is the kind of first paragraph that makes you read the second, which is also good. Tucking it under the arm, the first acquisition of the afternoon, the rain against the front window, visible from here, the movement of it on the glass, the street beyond it gray and wet and entirely unappealing, the inside of the shop warm and dry and smelling of old paper and entirely appealing. The contrast between the two is very much in the shop's favor, which is perhaps why secondhand bookshops are always better on rainy afternoons than any other kind of afternoon. The rain outside making the inside more itself, more specifically, what it is, the warmth and the dryness, and the smell more present, for having the wet gray world outside to compare themselves to. The cat has not moved. Its breathing continues its barely perceptible rise and fall. The bell above the door has been silent since your arrival. The person in the back room has not reappeared. The shop is entirely yours for the moment, which is the best way for a secondhand bookshop to be on a rainy afternoon. Present and warm and full of books and entirely, unhurriedly yours. Moving further into the shop, the shelves closer together toward the back, the space between them narrower, requiring a slight sideways movement in places to pass through. The light here coming from a lamp on a high shelf rather than from the front window, warmer and more orange than the daylight at the front. The books here older on average, not in the valuable sense, just in the sense of having been here longer, of being the books that haven't been taken by anyone yet, that have been waiting on this shelf through whatever number of rainy afternoons the shop has experienced since they arrived here, from wherever they came from before. A section labeled in pencil on a piece of card, Nature. Books about birds, about rivers, about particular landscapes, about the natural world in various registers from the scientific to the personal. A field guide to British trees, its cover, a cross-section of a trunk showing the rings, its pages slightly swollen from an encounter with moisture at some point in its past. The pages still fully readable, but slightly wavy. The book having a slightly three-dimensional quality as a result. A personal account of a year spent watching a particular stretch of coastline. The author's name and the title in a plain font on a plain cover, the modesty of the design suggesting confidence in the contents. An older book about hedgerows, their history and ecology, and the particular communities of animals and plants that inhabit them. Its cover illustration detailed and slightly faded. The hedgerow depicted in a style that is somewhere between botanical illustration and landscape painting. Taking the hedgerow book from the shelf, its weight is satisfying. A proper book, not a slim volume. The pages numerous and the paper slightly thick. Opening to the illustration section, which is in the middle of the book, on slightly glossier paper than the rest, the illustrations in color, detailed drawings of the various inhabitants of hedgerows, insects, small mammals, birds, plants, each one labeled in small, careful text. Looking at each illustration for a moment. The dormouse, curled and brown and entirely implausible looking. The various beetles, their carapaces detailed and slightly jewel-like. The blackthorn in flower, white against the dark thorns. Closing the book, putting it back. The book under the arm still. The novel from the M and N section. Moving back toward the front of the shop, and then to the shelves on the right side, which have not been looked at yet. History here, and biography at the far end. The section cards in the same penciled handwriting as the nature section. The same plastic holders yellowed in the same way. The whole shop having a consistency of style and atmosphere that speaks of a single mind. Behind it. A person who has thought about what kind of place this is, and made it that way deliberately, and maintained it that way over time. The history section. Books about various periods and places. Their covers ranging from the photographic, to the painted, to the entirely typographic. Their thicknesses ranging from slim pamphlets to substantial volumes. A history of a particular English town across several centuries. Its cover, a painting of the town's high street at some point in the 19th century. The buildings recognizable as the same buildings that are presumably still there. The street filled with people and horses and carts that are not. A book about a single year. A famous year. The kind of year that has been written about many times from many angles. Its cover, a photograph from that year. The image both familiar and strange. Familiar from having been reproduced so many times. Strange from being looked at now, from this distance, with everything that followed it known, and everything that was then unknown about it, now settled. The shop bell rings, the door opening, a brief intrusion of outside air and rain sound. Another customer arriving, their footsteps on the floor at the front of the shop. The quiet that was yours alone is no longer entirely yours, but is still largely yours. The other person at the front of the shop occupied with their own browsing, their own particular navigation of the shelves, their own rainy afternoon in this warm and dry and book-smelling place. The other customer is browsing the fiction shelves at the front, their back to the room, their attention entirely on the spines in front of them. They have brought the smell of the rain in with them, a cold and wet smell that mingles briefly with the shop's warm smell and then is absorbed by it. The shop asserting its own atmosphere over the intruder. The warm old paper smell reasserting itself within a minute or two as the door closes and the rain is outside again, and the shop is inside again. The biography section at the far right of the shop. The books here are mostly hardbacks, the format of biography, tending toward the substantial, thick spines, solid covers, the weight of a life rendered in pages. Some of the covers have photographs of their subjects, others have paintings or drawings or simply text. A biography of someone whose name is very famous, whose face on the cover shows them at a particular age, in a particular moment, with a particular expression that has been captured and held and reproduced on this cover, and looked at by however many people have picked up this book over the years, and put it back, or taken it home, or left it eventually in a secondhand bookshop, where it has ended up on this shelf, at the far right of the history section, a biography of an architect. The subject not immediately recognizable from the name alone, but the buildings on the cover immediately recognizable. Buildings that have been looked at many times without knowing who designed them. Buildings that are simply part of the landscape of cities, present and taken for granted, and now here is the person who made them. Their face on the cover of a book, in the biography section of a secondhand bookshop on a rainy afternoon, taking it off the shelf, reading the back, putting it under the arm alongside the novel. 2 books now. The other customer has moved to the history section, their browsing having progressed from fiction to something more specific, their presence now closer, their quiet movement along the shelves parallel to yours for a moment, before they stop at a book that interests them and you move on. The brief proximity resolving back into the comfortable independence of two people browsing the same shop at the same time with their own purposes. The lamp at the back of the shop, the warm orange light it throws across the shelves and the floor, the rain at the front window, visible from here as a movement on the glass. A gray and steady movement that has been there all afternoon and will be there when you leave. The smell of the shop, which has not changed since you arrived and will not change after you leave, which is one of the things that is good about this kind of place. It is what it is and continues to be what it is, regardless of who comes and goes. The smell and the warmth and the books and the cat and the person in the back room, all present and consistent and available to anyone who pushes open the dark green door on a rainy afternoon and steps inside. The novel under the arm, the architect's biography. 2 books for the afternoon, which is enough, which is perhaps slightly more than enough, given the books already at home, that have been waiting to be read for longer than is easy to admit. But these were found today, on this shelf, in this shop, on this particular rainy afternoon, and that gives them a context that the books at home don't have. A story of their own acquisition that is small and entirely ordinary, and entirely specific to today. Going to the counter, the cat still asleep in its chair, its position unchanged from an hour ago, its commitment to sleep absolute and entirely admirable. The bookshop owner appearing from the back room at the sound of footsteps near the counter, their glasses back on their forehead, their expression the same unhurried and slightly assessing expression as when you arrived. The books placed on the counter, the prices checked, small penciled numbers on the inside front covers, modest in the way that secondhand bookshop prices are modest. The books priced to be bought rather than to maximize return on whatever was paid for them. The exchange. Money across the counter, the books into a paper bag that the owner produces from somewhere below the counter. A bag with the shop's name on it in the same style as the section cards inside. Handwritten and slightly amateur and entirely right for the shop. Thank you. Thank you. The transaction complete, both parties satisfied, the books now yours. The afternoon now finished in this particular way. The door, the bell, the rain immediately present again, cold and fine and very wet. The street outside gray and entirely itself. The shop behind you warm and dry, and already, in the moment of leaving it. Something that was and will be again, but is not right now. Not until the next rainy afternoon. The paper bag under the coat, the rain on the face, the street ahead. The afternoon complete. The shelves at the back of the shop are different from the shelves at the front. The front shelves have a certain order to them. The alphabetical fiction, the organized sections of biography and history and travel and so on. Each section indicated by a small, handwritten card slotted into the shelf above it in a plastic holder that has yellowed slightly with age. The back shelves are less organized, or organized according to a different principle. One that is not immediately apparent, but that reveals itself over time as something more like association than category. Books that belong together not because they share a genre or a subject, but because they share some quality that the person who placed them there understood, and that becomes visible the longer you look. A shelf of books about islands, not labeled as such, just a shelf on which, gradually, over the course of looking at the spines, it becomes clear that every book present is in some way about an island or islands, travel accounts and novels and histories, and one very slim volume of poetry whose cover shows a coastline from above, the sea on both sides. How these came to be together on this shelf is not apparent. Whether they were placed deliberately or accumulated there by some process of selection that operated below the level of conscious organization is impossible to say. They are there. They belong together. This is enough. A shelf of very old paperbacks. Not old in a valuable way, not first editions or rare printings, but old in the way that mass-market paperbacks from the 60s and 70s are old. Their covers illustrations in the graphic style of that era, their spines creased and their pages yellowed to a deep cream that is almost orange in some of them, the paper having oxidized over the decades into something warmer than it started as. The smell of these is stronger than the general smell of the shop, more specific, more concentrated. The smell of a particular era of paperback production that used a particular kind of paper that ages in a particular way. A smell that is not unpleasant. That is, in fact, one of the more distinctive and evocative smells in the general category of old book smells. Pulling one out. A thriller from 1968. Its cover, a woman in a red dress against a dark background. Her expression suggesting danger or excitement or both. The title in a font that is entirely of its time. Opening to the first page. The paper is soft and very slightly brittle at the edges. The text set in a slightly smaller font than modern thrillers use. The margins slightly narrower. Reading the first page slowly, then the second. The prose has the particular quality of its era, direct and unironic. Moving quickly, assuming a reader who will keep up. Putting it back after 2 pages, not because it is bad, but because the browsing is the thing. The moving through the shelves, and the taking out, and the putting back. The contact with all these different books in all these different years. The biography section. A long shelf running along the back wall, its books, more varied in size than the fiction shelves. The larger format biographies and memoirs mixed with the standard size ones. The shelf slightly overcrowded as a result. Some books leaning against their neighbors at angles that suggest they have been that way for some time and have made their peace with it. Running a finger along the spines here. Names. A politician from several decades ago. A musician from the same era. A scientist whose work you know, but whose life you don't. An explorer whose name you don't recognize at all. An actress whose face is on the cover. Photographed at what must have been the height of her fame. Her expression confident and slightly amused. Her eyes looking directly at the camera with the ease of someone who is entirely comfortable being looked at. Taking the explorer's biography off the shelf. It is heavier than it looks. A proper hardback, its cover, plain navy blue with gold lettering. Its pages thick and slightly cream-colored. A photograph section in the middle on glossier paper. Black and white photographs of somewhere cold and very empty. Landscapes of ice and sky with small human figures in them that make the landscapes look even more vast than they would without the figures. Reading the caption beneath one of the photographs. Reading it again. Putting the book under the arm alongside the novel from earlier. The travel section. Books about places mostly. Accounts of journeys and sojourns and extended stays in various parts of the world at various periods of the last century. The covers here are more various than anywhere else in the shop. Some with photographs, some with illustrations, some with maps, some with nothing but text on a plain background. A book about a year spent in a remote valley, in the mountains of a country that was called something different when the book was written. A book about a series of journeys by boat along a coastline. A book about walking, a very long walk. The author's account of what they saw and thought and felt over however many months it took. Taking this one out and reading the first paragraph of the first chapter, which begins in the middle of somewhere. The author already walking, already several days in. The beginning of the walk already behind them, and not described yet. A decision about where to start the story that is immediately interesting. This one under the arm too. 3 books now. The arm slightly full. Moving more slowly along the shelves. The weight of the books, a mild and pleasant encumbrance, a physical record of the afternoon's accumulation. The rain continues against the front window. Audible from here at the back of the shop. A soft and consistent sound. The rain having maintained its steady pace all afternoon without intensifying or easing. Just continuing, just being rain on a gray afternoon. In a way that makes the inside of the bookshop more of what it is. The cat at the front of the shop has not moved since you came in. The person in the back room has not reappeared. The shop is still entirely yours, which is still the best way for it to be. A shelf of poetry, small volumes mostly, their spines thin, and their titles often not immediately clear about what they contain. Collections whose titles are the titles of poems or images or single words that could mean many things. Some names recognized, most not. Pulling out a slim volume whose cover is a landscape, a field, a pale sky, late afternoon light or early morning light. It is not clear which, and opening it to a random page and reading a poem, reading it slowly, reading it again, closing the book and holding it for a moment, and then putting it back on the shelf. Not because it isn't worth keeping, but because some books belong to the place where you found them, belong to the shelf and the shop and the rainy afternoon, and taking them away would change what they are, in a way that leaving them doesn't. A shelf of books about art and artists, not the large format glossy books of museum catalogs, but smaller, more personal books, monographs and essays and letters and diaries. The kind of books about art that are more interested in the person who made it than in the work itself, or that approach the work through the person, understanding the one through the other. A collection of letters between two artists written over several decades. Their friendship and their arguments and their long silences visible in the letters. The correspondence forming a kind of portrait of two lives that is more intimate than any biography. A diary kept by a painter during a particular period. The entries short and sometimes cryptic, recording the weather and the state of the work, and occasional observations about the world outside the studio. The voice in the entries very specific and very present, despite everything that separates the moment of writing from the moment of reading. The lamp at the back of the shop, the warm orange light it throws across the shelves and the books and the floor, catching the golds of old spines and the pale gray of newer ones, making everything slightly warmer and more amber than it would be in natural light. Under this light, the books look particularly good, the old ones especially, their faded covers and worn spines catching the warmth of the lamp and giving it back in a way that makes them look less like objects that have been used and slightly damaged by time, and more like objects that have been enriched by it, that carry their years visibly and well. The narrow passage between two shelves near the back of the shop, just wide enough to move through comfortably, the shelves on either side close enough that the books on both sides are visible simultaneously. The spines of the left-hand shelf and the spines of the right-hand shelf both readable from the center of the passage. The space between them entirely occupied by books in a way that is very satisfying, that makes the browsing feel particularly concentrated and particular. The books more present for being close on both sides. A shelf of local interest books, maps and guides and histories of the county and surrounding areas, local geology and local wildlife and local architecture, the kind of books that are interesting specifically because of where you are, and that would be less interesting somewhere else. A history of the town the shop is in, not the town you are from, a different town, this town, whose history is particular, and whose history is largely unknown to you, and whose history is available here in this slim and slightly dated volume, whose cover photograph shows the town center at some point in the 20th century, recognizably the same place, but different in the small and telling ways that towns change over decades. Taking it off the shelf and reading the introduction, which is written in the style of local history introductions, earnest and slightly formal. The author clearly knowing a great deal about their subject and being entirely committed to sharing it, putting it back. This is a book for someone who lives here, for someone who will read it at home and recognize the streets and buildings it describes, leaving it for them, standing in the passage between the shelves, with the 3 books under the arm, the novel, the explorer's biography, the walking book, the afternoon's accumulation, modest and specific and entirely the product of this particular shop and this particular browsing, books that would not have been found elsewhere, that found their way into the arm through the particular sequence of shelves, and spines and moments of attention that constitute an afternoon in a secondhand bookshop. The shop quiet around you, the rain outside, the lamp in the back, the cat in its chair, the books on every side, moving back through the passage to the main part of the shop. The front of the shop visible now, the window in its rain, and the street beyond it, and the cat in its chair, and the counter, and the door with its brass bell. The other customer, if there was another customer, has gone. The bell must have rung again at some point, without being noticed, absorbed into the general background of the afternoon. And now the shop is yours again, entirely. The same warm and quiet and book-smelling place it was when you arrived. Back to the fiction shelves. Not looking for anything now, just moving along them slowly. The 3 books under the arm. The browsing done for practical purposes, but continuing for its own sake. For the simple pleasure of being in front of shelves of books and looking at their spines, without needing to find anything or take anything else. The spines going past, the names, the titles, the years of publication visible in the style of the covers, the decades readable in the font choices and the illustration styles and the color palettes, the whole history of a century of paperback publishing visible on this one shelf if you look at it that way, which you are doing now without any urgency or any particular purpose. A title that stops the eye. Not one of the books under the arm. Those are settled. Those are coming home. A different book on the fiction shelf toward the end. Its spine very simple. Just the title and the author's name in a plain font on a plain dark background. The title is 3 words that together mean something specific and slightly unexpected, that create a combination that is not quite an image and not quite an idea, but something between the two. Taking it off the shelf. Looking at the cover, which is as simple as the spine. No illustration, just the title and the author's name, and a very slight texture in the dark background that might be deliberate or might just be the effect of age on a plain cover. Opening to the first page, the first sentence is very short. 4 words. The kind of first sentence that either works entirely or doesn't work at all, that commits to simplicity and depends on what follows. Reading the second sentence, which is longer. The third, the fourth. The paragraph completing itself with the kind of movement that a good first paragraph has, beginning somewhere, moving, arriving somewhere slightly different. The reader moved to, the contract between the book and the reader established in these few sentences. Putting this one under the arm too. 4 books now. The arm very full. The afternoon very much over in its browsing phase, and clearly moving toward its paying phase. To the counter, setting the 4 books down on the worn wood of it. The cat in its chair, still asleep. Its breathing still barely visible. Its commitment to sleep still absolute. The bookshop owner appearing from the back room at the sound of the books being set down. Their glasses on their forehead again. Their expression unchanged. Unhurried. Assessing. Mildly satisfied in the way that bookshop owners are mildly satisfied when people bring books to the counter. Looking at the 4 books. Penciled prices. Checked on the inside front covers. A total arrived at, mentioned, modest as expected. The exchange. Money and books, and the paper bag, with the shop's name on it. Is there anything else, they ask, the question entirely without pressure, the tone of it suggesting that there might not be, and that this would be entirely fine, that the transaction is complete if you want it to be complete. Nothing else today, thank you. Good. The bag with the 4 books, the door, the bell, the rain still falling, as it has been falling all afternoon, as it will continue to fall for some time yet. The afternoon having progressed toward its later stages, without any sign of the weather having progressed with it. Outside, the street wet and gray, the rain fine and cold, and immediately, on the face and the shoulders of the coat, the warmth of the bookshop already receding, as the outside air replaces it. The bag under the arm, the 4 books inside it, their weight slight and their presence entirely satisfying. The novel, the explorer's biography, The Walking Book, the four-word title novel that was found at the end. The afternoon's accumulation carried home through the rain with the particular satisfaction of having spent an afternoon in exactly the right place, doing exactly the right thing, which was being in a warm bookshop on a rainy afternoon, browsing shelves and buying books, which is one of the most specifically pleasant ways to spend an afternoon that exists, which requires no justification and no improvement, which is simply good. The rain falls. The bookshop behind you continues to be what it is. The cat continues to sleep. The books continue to wait on their shelves. The afternoon continues its gray and rainy progress toward evening. The back room of the bookshop is through a door behind the counter, past the cat, who has finally shifted position slightly, rolled from one side to the other without waking, a maneuver accomplished entirely in sleep, with the fluid ease of something that has been doing this for years, and through a low doorway into a room that is smaller than the shop, and arranged entirely for the comfort of whoever is in it, rather than for the display of anything. 2 chairs, an old sofa along one wall, its cushions compressed into shapes that correspond to the people who have sat in it most over the years. 2 distinct depressions in the seat cushion indicating where those people sat most often. The back cushion slightly less compressed. The arms of it worn to something almost smooth at the places where arms have rested. A small table in front of the sofa with a lamp on it, already on, its light warm and low, and a stack of books on one end, a mug on the other, and a small plate with a few biscuits on it that have clearly been there for some time, the biscuits slightly soft from the moisture in the air. The bookshop owner is in one of the chairs, a low armchair to the left of the sofa, its back to the corner of the room, a book open on their lap, their reading glasses now on their nose, rather than their forehead. They look up when you come through the door, with the unhurried acknowledgement of someone who is expecting this, who has seen customers make their way to the back room before, and is neither surprised nor inconvenienced by it. There is a kettle on a small table near the window, they say. Tea things beside it. Help yourself. And then they are back in their book. The kettle. On a small wooden table against the wall, below the backroom single window, which looks out onto a narrow yard. A few plant pots, a section of wall. The sky above it gray and wet. The kettle is an old electric one, its surface slightly scaled inside from years of use. Its cord slightly stiff. The tea things beside it. A box of tea bags. A small ceramic pot of sugar with a small spoon in it. 2 clean mugs on a folded cloth. A small jug of milk that is cold from wherever it was kept, before it was placed here. Filling the kettle from a small sink in the corner. The sound of the water, switching it on. The very faint sound of the element beginning to heat. Selecting a mug, the one on the left, slightly larger than the other. Its color a warm dark blue. Its handle a comfortable shape. A tea bag. The wait for the kettle, which is not long, which is just long enough to look out the small window at the yard. The plant pots with their late season plants. The wet stone of the yard floor. The gray sky above the wall. And feel the particular contentment of being in a warm room waiting for a kettle to boil, while rain falls outside, which is one of the simplest and most reliable sources of contentment available. The kettle boils, the water poured over the tea bag, the bag steeping, the color spreading from it into the water, in that immediate and slightly dramatic way that tea always steeps, the dark concentration at the bag dispersing into the full volume of the water. The milk, the bag removed and placed on the small plate beside the biscuits. There is already a used bag there, confirming that this is the correct place for it. The mug warm in both hands, the sofa, sitting in it on the right side, where the cushion is slightly less compressed. The compression there still present, but less specific, more general, more accommodating of a new shape. The books from the shop under the arm set on the table beside the lamp. The novel, the explorer's biography, the walking book, the mug on the knee, both hands around it, the warmth of it, the bookshop owner in their chair, reading, not reading aloud, not making any sound, just reading, their eyes moving across the page at the particular pace of someone absorbed in what they are reading, their expression neutral and entirely inward, their presence in the room a comfortable one, the presence of someone who is entirely at ease in the space they occupy, and requires nothing from you, and offers nothing except the mild companionship of another person reading in the same warm room. The rain against the back window, the yard wet beyond the glass, the plant pots glistening, the sky continuing its gray and steady rainfall, the lamp on the table making its warm circle, the mug warm on the knee, the books on the table beside the lamp, their spines visible, the novel's slightly faded title, the plain navy of the explorer's biography, the walking book's cover with its lone figure on a pale path, opening the novel. The first paragraph again, which was good when you read it at the shelf, and is good again now, the words the same, but the context different. The shelf was browsing, this is reading, the body settled into the sofa, the mug warm, the rain outside, the lamp on, the back room quiet around you. The second paragraph, the third, the story beginning to establish itself, the place and the time and the people becoming present in the way that the beginning of a good novel establishes things without announcement, just by being specific, just by choosing the right details and trusting the reader to receive them. The tea cools slowly, each sip taken with the same unhurried attention as the last. The temperature dropping in stages from very hot to warm to the temperature that tea is when it has been read over, rather than drunk with any particular urgency. The biscuit from the plate, slightly soft, as expected, sweet and plain. The kind of biscuit that exists to be eaten in exactly this kind of situation, in the back room of a bookshop on a rainy afternoon, beside a lamp with a novel open on the knee. The bookshop owner turns a page, the sound of it very quiet in the quiet room. They do not look up. The cat, whose presence in the back room has been announced by the soft sound of it jumping from the counter chair and padding through the doorway, settles on the other end of the sofa with the proprietary ease of an animal that knows exactly whose sofa this is, which is its sofa, which it is generously sharing. It turns twice in the small space of the sofa's far end and lies down, its back against the sofa's arm, its eyes closing immediately and completely. The rain, the lamp, the tea, the novel open on the knee, the cat at the far end of the sofa, the bookshop owner reading in the corner, the back room warm and quiet and entirely sufficient, sealed against the gray afternoon outside by nothing more complicated than walls and a roof, and the simple competence of a small, warm room, doing what small, warm rooms do, which is to be warm and small, and full of the right things, and entirely, completely, deeply adequate to the afternoon, and the rain, and the requirement for somewhere good to be. The pages turn, the tea finishes, the rain continues. The cat breathes its slow and sleeping breath at the far end of the sofa. The lamp holds its warm circle over the table, and the books, and the mug, and the novel, and the hands holding the novel, and all of it is warm and quiet and still, and the afternoon is long, and there is nowhere to be and nothing required. And the story on the page continues its quiet unspooling, and the rain continues its quiet falling, and the back room of the small bookshop on the gray, rainy afternoon holds everything with the patient warmth of a place that has been doing exactly this for a very long time. The novel, the page, the words, each one following the last without urgency. The story moving at the pace of a rainy afternoon in a warm back room, which is the right pace, which is the only pace available here, which is slow and unhurried and entirely sufficient. The eyes on the page, the words going in. The story presents somewhere below the level of active attention, somewhere warm and dim and continuous, like the lamp, like the rain, like the cat breathing at the end of the sofa, like the bookshop owner turning pages in the corner, like the afternoon itself, just continuing, just being what it is, just warm and quiet and entirely, peacefully, completely here. The mug empty on the table, the novel open on the knee, the pages turning at longer and longer intervals as the afternoon deepens and the rain continues, and the back room holds its warmth, and the cat sleeps, and the bookshop owner reads, and the lamp burns its warm circle, and the rain falls on the window, and everything is still and warm and quiet and exactly, precisely, entirely right. The novel rests open on the lap, the page that was being read still there, the words still present, but the reading has slowed to almost nothing. The eyes resting on the page without following any particular line, the attention spread out into the room itself. The warmth of it, the lamp, the sound of the rain, the cat's slow breathing at the other end of the sofa, the bookshop owner turning a page in the corner with a sound so soft it is barely present. The back room at this stage of the afternoon. The light outside has changed, the gray of the afternoon deepening slightly toward the gray of the early evening. The window showing a darker yard than it did when the tea was made. The plant pots less distinct. The wall at the far end of the yard less visible. Inside the room, the lamp is more dominant now. Its warm circle more clearly the primary light source. The room gathered around it in a way that feels settled and complete. The cat, still at the far end of the sofa, its sleep so deep and so complete that it has not reacted to any of the small sounds of the afternoon. The page turnings, the mug being set down, the occasional shift of position on the sofa. It is a very good sleeper, which is to say, it is a cat, and it sleeps the way cats sleep, which is entirely and without reservation, and without any apparent concern for what might be happening around it. Its breathing is barely visible, just the faintest rise and fall of its flank, the slowest possible evidence of life, very restful to observe. The bookshop owner, still in their armchair in the corner, still reading, their position unchanged from when you came in. The book on their lap perhaps further along than it was, the afternoon's reading having progressed at whatever pace their particular book and their particular afternoon has determined. They are entirely self-contained in their reading, entirely present in it, the room around them existing as context rather than content, the chair and the lamp and the rain outside, and the cat on the sofa, all peripheral to whatever is happening on the page in their lap. The novel on your knee, picking it up again. Finding the place, not difficult, the reading having stopped recently enough that the place is clear. The last paragraph read still visible, the story still present in the mind in its current state. Waiting for the next paragraph without any particular urgency, reading on. The story continuing, the characters doing what they do in the pages of the book, entirely independent of the afternoon and the rain and the back room of the bookshop, existing in their own time and their own place, which is the space of the novel, which is particular and consistent and available whenever the book is open. The rain against the window. It has been raining all afternoon and shows no sign of stopping, which is entirely fine, which is more than fine, which is in fact perfect, given that stopping would require going back out into it, which is not required yet, which is not required for some time, the afternoon being long, and the back room being warm, and the novel being good, and the tea having been good, and the cat being good company in its complete and total indifference, and the bookshop owner being good company in their complete and total absorption in their own book. The two of them together making the back room what it is, which is a room in which reading is not just permitted, but is the entire point, which is the best kind of room. The lamp holds its warm circle. The pages of the novel continue to turn at their slow and unhurried intervals. The cat breathes. The bookshop owner reads. The rain falls on the yard and on the street outside the shop and on the roofs of the surrounding buildings, and on everything in the gray afternoon that is not indoors, beside a lamp with a book, which is a great many things, all of them wet, none of them as good as this. The body in the sofa has made its final adjustments. The cushion has accommodated itself to the weight and the warmth of sitting here for this length of time. The sofa's long history of being sat in, making it entirely adequate to this particular sitting, the particular depression in the cushion, that was here before you arrived, having adjusted very slightly. To incorporate you, to include you in its accumulated record of who has sat here and for how long and in what weather. The novel, the lamp, the rain, the cat, the warm back room of the small bookshop, the afternoon outside continuing its gray and rainy progress toward evening, unobserved from in here, unimportant from in here, entirely beside the point of the warmth and the book, and the lamp and the cat and the rain on the window, and the quiet and the entirely sufficient and entirely peaceful now. The pages turn, the rain falls, the cat breathes, the lamp holds its light, and everything is warm and quiet and still, and there is nothing required and nowhere to be, and the afternoon is long, and the book is good, and the back room of the small secondhand bookshop holds everything in its warm and patient way, as it has held every other rainy afternoon, as it will hold every one that follows, quietly and without any particular announcement. Just being warm, just being here, just being exactly and completely enough. That's all for tonight at the Nodding Hour. If these stories helped you rest, subscribe so you never miss a new one. Sleep well. We'll see you next time.